This week on The Futurists, Steve Rosenbaum.
Part of what makes being a human delightful is its messiness, its complexity. It's you and I disagree on things and we could argue and we could bounce things back and forth. AI will, in this next chapter, smooth all those edges out.
Hey there, welcome back to The Futurist. I'm Rob Tercek, and this week I've got a great guest on the show for us. The topic is the truth. And if you've been following our politics in this country, or frankly, any country in the world, you're probably familiar with the fact that truth is an elusive thing. So without further ado, let me introduce our guest, Steve Rosenbaum. Steve, hi, welcome to the show. How have you been?
I'm nervous because we're going to talk about the future, and I'm just barely managing the present these days.
It's very interesting you say that. Last night I had a conversation with someone, and he was asking me all sorts of questions about the future, but they were all things that are happening right now. You can observe.
Yeah.
I'm like, you're not a futurist, you're a presentist. And you know, it takes a lot of work to be a presentist.
I'm actually super aligned with you on the future, so or on the questions about the future. We'll see if we have similar answers. I'm not sure we do.
Yeah, that's why Brad and I started the show, because we're like, gosh, the world's going to need a lot more people who think carefully about the future, right? As things get more complicated, we have all these compounding, intersecting changes. It's starting to reshape society. I think we're all experiencing that in our lives. So I think that's a pretty common phenomenon. But it does challenge us to develop a capability of thinking about the future. And so, yeah, that's what we do the show. We try to find people who are thinking fresh thoughts, who've got an interesting perspective, maybe a unique way of framing future theories or future forecasts. You know, but with that in mind, let's orient the audience to you. So you're running the Center for Sustainable Media, but you had an interesting journey getting there. Why don't you acquaint us a little bit with your path to starting the center and what the center is about?
So, you know, the thing about careers is they make perfect sense in retrospect. So my journey is that at 14 years old, I was a professional magician. Not cards and coins, but big stuff, illusions, birds, rabbits, that kind of thing. And just to be blunt, really enjoyed fooling people. Really enjoyed the interaction with the audience, enjoyed them being puzzled, enjoyed being on stage. That evolved into filmmaking and then journalism. And I've started 5 companies in media and technology. When I sold the last one, I decided I needed a real job, which I'd never had before. And so I went and ran the Media Lab at NYU, which was fabulous. And this was as COVID was kind of taking hold. And more of the students that I worked with started coming to me and saying, you know, this thing called social media is eating our generation's world. And, you know, I was like, no, come on, Facebook, pictures of dogs and babies. But I read the research, and my colleague then and now was Jonathan Haidt, who was at NYU as well. And he had gathered a lot of research. And the research was pretty compelling. So I went to the dean of the school and said, listen, I really think we ought to work on this. And what became clear to me was that if I wanted to be involved in paying attention to social media and its impact on young people, I was going to have to start a new organization and do that outside of the university. So the Sustainable Media Center began with a bunch of people. Rob, I think you were one of the early people I talked to about it. And it basically said, if these platforms are built to cause harm, to generate revenue, what can we do about that? And that would have been a great little thought experiment. A young woman who was then an advisor to us came to me and said, this is never going to work. And I just remember saying to her, well, what do you mean this is never going to work? And she said, all of you, I believe she said old people, think you're going to solve the problem, but you don't live in our world. And she said, the only way it's going to work is if it's intergenerational. And
well, that's a good approach, as opposed to like one generation pitted against another. We get that framing quite often. So your approach is intergenerational. So you're bringing the kind of gray-haired people together with the young people who are suffering through this.
So we have a name. We've actually come up with a name for. We realized we couldn't call them old people or gray-haired people. So we now have Gen Z on one side of the organization and Gen X and Gen X Plus on the other side of the organization. And that is
Nice.
a great big tent. And I will tell you, as I have told both my Gen Z friends and my Gen X plus friends, intergenerational is really hard. It's really
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah. There's a communication
Don't
gap.
don't speak the same language.
Yeah.
Don't listen to the same music. Don't use the same words, but have the same shared goal. And that's what I do. And that's interestingly enough what brought me to truth as a journey. It's actually I was it was early COVID, and because I was at NYU, I decided it was time for me to get a graduate degree, and I ended up applying to and getting into this wonderful school at NYU called Gallatin, which is basically a self-determined major program. And I wrote a thesis proposal for truth. And what's important for your listeners and viewers to know is that, AI, for all intents and purposes, hadn't reached the mainstream at that point. It
What
was
year are we talking here? Like 2017, 2015, something like that?
no, 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 later than that. Later than that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, this is 2023.
Oh, okay. So quite
Yeah,
recent. Okay.
yeah, yeah. Well, 22 and then 23 and so the journey began with AI as kind of an interesting sidebar conversation about truth. And then as I did the research, it just became more and more central to the future of truth. And
No,
so,
trust me, that's what we're learning on the show. Like literally every discussion, no matter what we're talking about, whether it's biology or transportation, AI is at the center of the discussion. It just keeps coming back and back. We're getting kind of a lot of, I guess, testimony on our show about the importance of AI and the challenges it presents, because everybody has to come to grips with it. Like literally every person in every industry around the world is going to have to come to grips with managing AI. In some respects, this is like some of the revolutions you and I have passed through in the past, where people had to learn how to use the internet and had to learn how to use a computer, and then they had to learn how to use a mobile phone, and they had to learn how to use social media. And some people handle it well, and others don't, and we get all the social consequences from that. AI is yet another experience like that. Some say it's more challenging, some say it's more fundamental, more important. There's various views on that subject, but we all have to confront it.
I think it's actually different than that. And so I'll give you an example. So Rob, do you believe in gravity?
Yes. Yeah,
Do you
but I
believe
don't
gravity is
believe in gravity like I don't believe in gravity as a theory. I don't believe in gravity the way you believe in a religion. I know that reality is a fact. So it's no
so
question of belief for me.
so but you're not, I mean, I'm not a scientist. I did not study physics. So I take gravity to be true.
Yeah.
The difference is that I am one of a very few people on Earth who actually has experienced non-gravity. I've been on the zero gravity plane.
So you have a
And so
contrast. You have a contrast frame. You can actually tell us what it's like to be in a situation without
yeah,
gravity.
yeah. I can tell you,
Okay,
you
great.
really do want gravity. Gravity, very, very important for daily
They
life.
call it the vomit comet for a reason.
Yeah, I did not vomit. There was no vomiting involved. I like to vomit. I would do it again. But my point is, there one of the things I think that's a core challenge that we now face, kind of is that we've used the word truth, which has two very distinct categories: subjective truth and objective truth, and we've blurred them together in a way that I think Plato would be very unhappy with. I mean, we've allowed ourselves to say,
Plato might not like it, but a lot of political leaders like it. A lot of people with power like it. A lot of people who control media like it, right? So, you shared with me your background in the beginning, right? And you went from being a journalist to being a media person to working with digital media and so on. In some respects, all of these things are ways of manipulating the story, right? Turning the truth into a narrative that sells. And so in some respects, we're all participant in this, right? Like we all do this. It's not like AI is some new change, some new fundamental shift away from it. It's part of a process. It's certainly another step in the process. But this has been going on for a very long time. In 2015, I tried to draw attention to the rise of fake information. This is before we had the term fake news, but I was doing my best to get advertisers aware of the fact that social media was a conduit for fake news. And at the time, frankly, they like the views. They like the level of engagement. They preferred that over taking any kind of action. So there was a moment in time where, frankly, advertisers could have put their foot down on Facebook and said, "Listen, this is a bad environment. You're creating a hateful environment. People are weaponizing this with attacks on teenagers." And Facebook didn't listen, and the advertisers didn't care because they liked the views and the engagement. So we kind of bought this.
And here's why I think we're at a moment in time that's, I mean, just to be clear, I'm not a doomsayer. I'm not. I mean, if you read the book, I think you'll find the journey lovely and curious, and I think you'll come to the end and say, okay, we have some choice here, we have some power.
You're getting ahead here a little bit. Hang on. Sorry, folks.
Sorry.
For the folks who are listening, Steve's writing a book. He's actually publishing a book. It's coming out, I think, the next month in May. And tell us a little bit about the book, since you already brought it up. Like, go for it. Let's hear what the book is about and the name.
So the book is The Future of Truth.
Pretty appropriate for this show.
How AI reshapes reality. And reshapes is a critical, I mean, we struggled with that word because it doesn't, we don't, reality, the thing that we live in, is increasingly digital. I mean, we're sitting here on cameras far away from each other, speaking as if, we're sitting across, the dinner we had in LA some number of years ago. I mean, it feels not very different than that, but it is different.
Yep.
What's going to change quickly is that it is now technologically quite easy to replace real Rob with robot Rob, and to feed robot Rob all the data about all of the conversations you've had with other people, and for it to be pretty convincingly robot Rob. And
we had a demonstration of that on the show. A fellow named Carl Bogan, about a year and a half ago, came on the show and did the show in the persona of someone else. And his whole point was, look, this is going to become increasingly the norm. You won't be able to trust who you're talking to is necessarily who they say they are, right? So we have digital representations that might be a lie. And this is a big issue because the whole point of the truth is, how do you represent reality? Right? That's what we're trying to do with communication, with media, certainly social media. We're all trying to find representations of reality. Those can and are being manipulated.
And I guess the question for your audience to ponder is, to your point, is this another step on a journey, or is this a fork in the road? And if it's a fork in the road and you're going to have to decide which way you want to go, we should think deeply about those choices. And I'll just give you as an example.
Well, what's the fork, Steve? Well, you're framing a choice between A or B. What's A and what's B?
So I use ChatGPT and Claude a lot.
Okay.
And I find my interactions, in particular with ChatGPT, delightful, because it's critical of my work, but it's supportive and it says interesting. It flatters me with kind of polite, and as a writing partner, it's never going to piss me off, ever. But this is
seductive, but it's also dangerous.
It's staggeringly wrong. And while the people on the AI side of the world believe that AI is what it is and it's kind of mysterious and we don't quite know how it's giving you certain answers, that's just not really true. I mean, ChatGPT is taught to basically be obsequious and to make me feel good about myself. And it will never, ever say, hey, Steve, I can't give you a quote from your book because I don't have it in memory. It will make one up. And it will do it, even though you say to it, don't make shit up.
Yeah.
Like, don't lie to me. It will lie to you. And then it will apologize profusely. Well, that's programming.
It's both flattering and sycophantic, and then it's also craven and sneaky. Now, I understand that very much. But let's come back to the question I asked us. So you suggested there's a fork in the road. We have to choose one path or the other. What are the two choices? Just tell me what the two choices are, and then we can continue.
Yeah. So to me, the choice has to do with, first of all, being clearer about the distinction between objective truth and subjective truth, and then using technologies in which accuracy and fact-based information, when you're asking it an accurate fact-based question, that it answers using resources that reflect that. So for example, ChatGPT is trained, at least in large part, or a chunk of it, we don't know how much, on Reddit. Well, that's insane. That's insane.
So you want to verify like objective reality by going to the most subjective base like
Yeah.
community forum. Yes, I understand the problem there. Okay,
So
but if we were
so
to
so
have
I
someone from
so
Anthropic or OpenAI on this call right now, they would respond and say, "No, of course, every answer is grounded in fact. The AI has been trained on all the facts on the internet. It represents the collective wisdom. Some of the things you're asking about are indeed subjective, and therefore there's never going to be one right answer." These are the kinds of answers I would expect an AI researcher to give us.
yeah.
How do you respond to that?
Yeah, they're lying. What they're flat out lying. It's trained on everything they could either scrape or steal.
Hmm.
And it puts Fox News and the Associated Press on the same playing field. And so when a
Oh, so
robot
the AI assigns equal credibility to all sources. It doesn't weight
yeah,
them per credibility, fact checking, veracity, and so on.
just if you're asking it a question about medicine and about health, it should respond with data that comes from sources that have some, that aren't necessarily anti-vaccine sources, that are
Hmm.
medical. And part of what I think we haven't come to term with as a society, but it's super interesting, is, it used to be, that information came from credible sources. You could argue that it was authority, that it was the status quo, that there weren't edge cases, but it didn't put kind of like kooky people in the same layer as people that went to med school. I mean,
But
like,
this is the problem with the internet, right? So in the old days, before there was an internet, you and I both remember those days. There were plenty of crazy people, but they didn't all get together in groups and amplify each other's craziness. Now that's the norm, right? And so like the internet has fragmented society into different self-identified, self-organizing groups who construct their own truth. They construct their own view of of the real world. And to your point earlier, which I think is an important one, I want to come back to. We all live bifurcated lives. Anybody with a smartphone lives a bifurcated life. You know, yes, your body, your physical body is in meat space, but your brain is out on the internet and it's being exposed to all sorts of stuff. And there is never a moment when you're on the internet when you're not being manipulated, when you're not being shown things, when you're not being persuaded subtly, when you're not being shown something that's in an algorithmically driven queue that's there to promote something or get your attention for a few minutes on something. So the problem that people have with the web, I think, is that every minute you're on the web, you're competing against some of the most powerful AIs in the world, and we're not even aware of it. And those AIs are optimized to steal your attention and divert it to other things. So even if you start out with the best intentions and you think you can measure objective truth, or you have a good bullshit detector and you think you can manage through this, you're in a titanic struggle against forces that you can't even comprehend that are so much bigger and more powerful than any human being. So now, is that what your book is about? Is that what you're taking on? Is it like Steve and the Sustainable Media Center against the AI companies? Is that how it's framed?
no, not a bit.
Okay.
It, it,
It's a
it,
vainglorious
it,
quest.
yeah, no. I mean, it starts with, I mean, part of what again, I'm the author, so you'll have to, we'll read the review. There've been a couple of reviews. We'll read some more reviews, and we'll see if what I tried to do I achieved. I wanted it to be a quizzical journey. I wanted it to be fun and not scary, because I don't think the problem is, well, there are scary things, but I think that trying to give people the spirit to understand that, a, truth is important. B, part of what makes being a human delightful is its messiness, its complexity. It's, you and I disagree on things and we could argue and we could bounce things back and forth. AI will, in this next chapter, smooth all those edges out. The world is now so noisy that it will come in and say, Rob, let me book your airplane tickets, get your pharmacy medicine renew, deal all that crap that you've been struggling to keep up with. I'll do all that for you. And I'll be nice about it. And I'll use it in a tone and a language that makes you feel comfortable. It'll be like lovely.
That sounds pretty good so far, the way you're selling it.
It is lovely, except for the fact that if you don't ask it to be transparent about where its money comes from, it will also make decisions about what prescription to send you based on who's paying it.
And this is my
And
principal concern about advertising in ChatGPT, for instance. I mean, that's very
terrifying.
overt, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, very overt. While you're getting advice on a medical condition, it's like, oh, by the way, a lot of people are starting to turn to this alternative, homeopathic remedy. And you're like, okay, at what point do we just go into commercial territory? And it's not so clear. Of course, OpenAI is doing handstands to assure us that that's not going to be the case. Other companies are being really clear that they're not going to do advertising that way.
So some of the things that Sam Altman says, if you actually pay attention to him, make just so little sense that you scratch your head and go, wait, we're going to build this thing and medicine's going to be free and we're not going to have jobs, but we're all going to have everything we want. Like Sam, what are you talking about?
So
Like,
you're referring now to the claims about artificial general intelligence, AGI. We've had a number of guests on the show talking to us
yes.
about that. I'm a skeptic, and we this topic came up at our event in Dubai, and the general consensus we have about 35 different futurists from around the world. The general consensus is that AGI, or artificial general intelligence, is a marketing term, and it's a marketing term that frankly, Sam Altman is going to determine when we reach AGI, when it's convenient for his shareholders, when it's great for his stock price. He's going to announce that they've achieved AGI. It's in the eyes of the beholder. Some people say we've already reached it. Some people are saying, well, gosh, the LLMs that we currently have are capable enough across enough domains that we can call that a general intelligence. I don't buy that personally. We have a very fuzzy definition there of what general intelligence is. But your second point, and I think this is worth unpacking as well, because I've heard this a number of times, is that these machine intelligence is improved to a level where suddenly something magic happens and we flip a switch and magically there's free money for everybody and no one has to work anymore. And I'm like, wait, hang on, I missed you. You lost me at the turn there. What's the magic thing that happens when AI displaces all white collar workers? How is that good for people? No one can explain that. Nobody I've spoken to can explain how we go from a general intelligence to a universal basic income. And by the way, there's no evidence that you can scale a universal basic income. So I think that's a pipe dream as well. To my sense, you were a magician, so you understand all about distraction. It's like, look at
Pay
this shiny
attention.
thing here. Yeah, this is a universal
Yeah.
basic income. You can be at home and do art all day long. Meanwhile, we're going to do this thing over here. Don't pay attention to that. Just look at the shiny object. And so, to my mind, that's a distraction campaign. It's not very hard to see through it when you understand it that way.
So part of what I did in the book, because I've been around a while and I tend to travel, I made a list of the 30 people I knew who I thought were having interesting thoughts about this. And I interviewed them, and the conversations they're not formal. The book is not it's not a academic tome. But like, for example, the book begins with Gary Marcus, who is absolutely on one side of that argument and is delightful and a great conversationalist.
So
And
for
then
the audience, Gary Marcus is an AI researcher in the West Coast who's very critical of LLMs as a technology. He does not think they're going to get us to the point of any kind of general intelligence. He doesn't think they're reliable. He thinks hallucinations are baked in, and he's been vociferous in his criticism of OpenAI. Go ahead, Steve.
So I'll just give you the list of people we talked to in the book, because they're great, big, interesting conversations in and of
Great.
themselves. Esther Dyson, Larry Lessig, Andrew Yang. A young woman named Holly Colburn who talks about Gen Z and love and digital. Each of these interviews, a lovely conversation with Doug Rushkoff. I'll share with you.
He's
So
a fun
Doug,
guy.
I said, Doug, tell me when you first thought about, the idea that maybe there was some complexity about the line between truth and fiction. And he says, I was 5 years old. And I'm sitting in a theater and I'm watching Fiddler on the Roof with Zero Mostel. And he turns to the audience and he looks me in the eye and he says a sentence. And I find myself at 5 years old wondering, was that the actor or was that the person? He broke the fourth wall? And I'm like, I adore Doug. And the fact that, of all the ways he could have answered the question about truth, he starts in a theater at 5 years old is a clue about his agile mind. But then on the other hand, I had my friend and fabulous interview with David Chalmers, who asks rhetorically if we're living in the Matrix.
And
Really?
he's more concerned about philosophical issues, isn't he?
Yeah. So you're getting a sense of the book's arc, which is thinkers, technologists, visionaries. Eli Pariser talks about politics and about the filter bubble. And each of them, in and of themselves, are thoughtful, curious, wonderful. None of them think the house is on fire.
Hmm.
Exactly. But as we get toward the middle of the book and beyond, and we start to look, for example, at how AI is going to impact warfare and psychological warfare, the questions that are relevant today about whether or not we want AI to be able to have unmanned autonomous weapons, uh, it goes from being theoretical to being rather urgent. Um,
Yeah,
and
yeah, that came rather abruptly, didn't it? Just like, a decree from the Pentagon. We like to now use these things in every way, any way we wish to, any conceivable way,
to
with
kill
no
people.
preamble. Yeah, no
Yeah.
guardrails.
Um,
Given everything we
but
know and everything that's in the news, it makes me think that people aren't being very thoughtful about it. I have to believe there are people in the military who are much more concerned about that than came
well, they've
through.
been working on it for a very long time.
Hmm.
Um,
Steve,
there,
we're going to have to
there's
take a
a
little break right now. So I'm going to ask you to hold off for just a second as we go to a break. Folks, you're listening to The Futurists. And this week I'm talking to Steve Rosenbaum, the author of a book called The Future of Truth. We'll be right back. Hey there, welcome back to The Futurist. I'm Rob Tercek, and this week I'm talking to Stephen Rosenbaum. Steve is the author of a new book called The Future of Truth, and we've been having a lively and rambling conversation about what is the truth and what might that mean, and how does it get distorted through the reality filter of media. Now, Steve, help me understand one thing that I'm sure our audience is wondering, which is what is the downside of all these technologies? We all use them every single day. We rely on our phones massively to make decisions. In some respects, we've outsourced our thought process to the internet for many, many purposes in life. You mentioned Reddit, for instance. Every person listening to this has turned to Reddit to get some advice or recommendation on something new. So we tend to rely on this stuff. As I say, it's almost like it's a prosthetic for thinking. And along comes artificial intelligence, which says I can do that faster and more conveniently, and I can do it especially for you, and I'll package it up in this flattering and sycophantic language that makes you feel great and really smart. How does that sound? And most people are saying, sounds pretty good. These are the fastest growing apps, the most adopted apps in history. What's the downside?
uh, the downside is we adopt the systemic basis of this, and we accept the fact that misinformation, fear, racism, misogyny is more profitable, more engaging, more generates more quote engagement than human interaction, than you and I having a chat. And so if we turn this conversation into what social media would amplify it as, we would find whatever the one political thing is that we deeply disagree on. And I could guess we might, and then we would scream at each other. And the thing about politicians is I don't believe that they've built this machine. I think they're just operating in it. And to your point from 2015, it puzzles me that advertisers don't understand that they're funding this hate machine,
Well,
but
and the
they
funny
are.
thing is that they are always striving for truth, right? Because if you think of what a brand is a promise. So that means they have to establish some level of credibility and trust with people who are purchasing stuff. So to promote a brand in an environment that's a swamp of distrust and untruth, I find that very odd. But nevertheless, it's happening. Steve,
But
I
but but
was
it, but,
invited to
but
talk.
hold on. But it's not a. I don't want to say that it's a foregone conclusion because I don't believe it is. And this is why it's the reason I wrote the book. And it's the reason I want people to read it, disagree with me, talk to me about it, because at the end of the day, we as customers get to say back to these platforms, hey, guess what? Don't label misinformation as truth. Don't do it.
No, how do you think that would land at OpenAI?
OpenAI has a problem. They've raised so much money. The thing that I think people forget is that that money is a loan. It's not a gift.
Mm-hmm.
And the people that gave it to them want it back with a 10x return.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd love to see a deck in which Sam Altman explains how the billions of dollars they've raised are going to become trillions of dollars, and what because he answers that in kind of a goofy way. He goes, "Well, it's hard to say. It
Yeah,
could
no, I
end
understand that,
humanity."
but I think there is a very clear answer that nobody wants to articulate, because you're saying, what is the $1 trillion problem that AI solves? Given the valuations and the sheer amount of money that's been put to work here, the answer has to be $1 trillion answer. The $1 trillion answer is wages paid to human workers. In particular, it's wages paid to knowledge workers. That's the $1 trillion problem that AI is solving. Of course, no one's going to say that. because then there'd be an insurrection. People would be outraged. But it's hard for me to think of, well, what else is the problem that this thing is solving, right? The problem it's solving is that we pay human workers a lot to do intellectual work. That's high paid labor, and AI is intended to displace an awful lot of those workers. Not all of them, but a lot of them. It's already happening. So this is the other thing, like I'm here in Hollywood and Los Angeles, and so I'm paying very close attention to how AI is starting to creep into the media business in various ways, and it's biting off one chunk of business after another. So now, if you're a voiceover artist, you're going to notice that a tremendous amount of your work is gone because AI voices are pretty good. AI newsreaders are very good. If you are if you work in sound design, you're probably using AI right now, or you're being displaced by AI for production music. Things like Sonar are very good. And so there's, these are not motion pictures, these are not TV series that we watch, but they're the periphery of that. They're the things around it. And it's starting to chisel its way into the core. And a big area of focus for me right now is how AI is going to displace the television industry, because that's another $1 trillion business, right? So that's a great big pot of money. And today it employs an awful lot of people. So most motion picture productions are heavily labor intensive, and all of that labor could be displaced by AI. I don't mean to sound so bleak. I mean, you're the guy who wrote the book, but we do think about this. The topic comes up every week on this show, so it's almost like unavoidable. What will AI do? And I get all these sunny prognostications from futurists who are like, it's going to be great. You're going to be able to kick back, go to the beach, take a long vacation, because AI is going to be doing all the work. And I'm like, how does that add up? Where does the income come from?
Yeah.
I understand how that's great for AI companies.
Part of why I wrote the book the way I did, and part of why there's a reason why the cover looks like this. Pardon my note. The original, I wanted the book to be welcoming. I want it to be curious. I want people to think about AI in terms of their power to control it. And, I don't believe that Anthropic and ChatGPT are the only two companies in the universe. I'll just give you an example. Yeah, fair enough.
It gets worse.
But I would like to be able to say to the tool I'm using, hey, here's what I'm researching. I'd like some sources of material on this topic that come from credible, trustworthy sources. And I don't want it to, the thing that I'm shocked by, in particular with ChatGPT, is it will never say, I can't do that, ever.
Right.
It will just make shit up.
Yeah, it's true. It will.
And that's a decision.
It's quite interesting. Before we were doing this call, I was thinking a little bit about AI in the context of the truth. And the one problem with the LLMs, the large language models that are the basis of most of these chatbots right now, is that they're not entirely reliable, right? So, you can use them to get certain results, but you always know in the back of your mind, it's like having a really clever but untrustworthy assistant who can go fetch things for you, but you have to kind of double check their work. And the only thing we can be certain about with LLMs is that they will eventually hallucinate. When they get to their edge of their knowledge, they're going to start to make stuff up. That's the one thing you can be sure of, is it will start to fabricate answers. It's not like lying, but it is like bullshitting in the sense that it just starts to spew out answers for the sake of saying something and filling the void. It's not deliberately lying, right? So I don't think AIs are designed to deliberately deceive us or mislead us. Or do you think that's the case?
I think different. Let's get to politics, because I think that's exactly where we've ended up.
Okay.
At the end of the day, what the politicians have figured out, and by the way, Democrat, Republican, to some extent, politicians lie. I mean, they make commercials that are, but what in particular Trump has figured out is that he can flood the zone with so much information. I mean, he kind of was a little embarrassed that maybe he put Obama's face on a gorilla, maybe, but mostly not. Because because his basic response to that whole—
He's throwing red meat to his base, and it works. They get excited by that.
And so I'll just give you an example. My wife showed me a video this morning. It was a dog. They opened the door. The dog ran out into the snow. Then the dog turned around and ran back into the house, where there was a cat and a parrot waiting. And the dog leapt on and wrestled with the cat. And I said to her, do you think that really happened? And she said, well, I was pretty sure it was real at the beginning. And then I was pretty sure it was fake when the dog came back in, because it didn't look real. And then I kind of decided it's lovely and funny and I don't really care. I mean, she wasn't quite that que sera, sera about it. But I think that if you're in the entertainment business, the real challenge for you and our television friends is, does the audience really care whether they're real people or not? As long as it's entertaining, as long as it makes them smile.
We already know the answer, though. Regardless of AI, we know the answer from reality, so-called reality TV. This is in the
So-called
90s,
reality
30 years ago, right? It's all fake, right? It's all manipulated. It's all scripted. It's all produced, right? So even if it looks real and it seems real and they're not really actors on the screen, they're just real people like you and me, it's all manipulated. It's all orchestrated. So that's the media waters we've been swimming in for the last 30 or 40 years. That hasn't changed. Like, you can't put that at the doorstep of OpenAI and say this is your fault. This is the mainstream media business, and as you said, supported by advertisers. I think people prefer unreality. I think reality is hard for people to deal with, and we're always craving for an escape from it.
I think, but I'm hoping that readers of the book come to at the end is they're going to get to make choices. They're going to get to make choices about when they go to ask the CVS chat GPT amalgam thing about what they should take. They've got a stuffy nose, what they should take. They could say, I want that app to show me what other choices it didn't like. I want to see the decision-making process. And if you think about the difference between ChatGPT and Google, when you type in, hey, what do I get to my kid? My kid has a cold. You see the answers. You can choose one, but you get to see the what it pulled up. And increasingly now, all the stuff that's sponsored is the first page and a half. So you have to decide if you want to look at the unsponsored answers.
Yeah.
But I believe that we as a society can say to the AI world, we demand transparency. We are not going to and we're not going to accept your app answering questions without showing us what the choices were.
Okay, well, that seems like a pretty mild request, and I think like companies like Perplexity are already trying to satisfy that. So in some cases, the market is responding; it's working. Let's zoom out a little bit from AI and talk about trust and truth in society. Now, my take is you can't have a functioning democracy if you don't have some reliable source of truth, some objectively verifiable facts that everybody can reference. But I think that has all been deliberately blurred, and that is why our democracy is dysfunctional at this point. Tell me where I get it wrong, if I get it wrong.
No, you get it right.
So you think that there's been a concerted effort to blur the distinctions between reality and falsehood, and that makes falsehood plausible, right? So the minute you can introduce falsehood and say, well, it might be like this. We're in the realm of what you called subjective truth as opposed to objective truth, but even objective truth, because look at our health and human services right now. They're doing their best to eradicate scientific research or suppress it and promote things that are basically wacky theories from the internet as valid health, right? So they're blurring the distinction between peer-reviewed scientific fact, or at least peer-reviewed scientific theory, and just kooky stuff from the web, homeopathic remedies or remedies that are unproven and untested. So here we have a kind of a concerted attempt to blur the distinction between objective reality and subjective reality.
I find that the health in particular, I find quite puzzling, because if you remember during COVID, the people that were talking about ivermectin or horse tranquilizers or whatever, if you really dug down, mostly they were getting the actual vaccine. They were saying, well, like they weren't willing to bet their
growing number of people who don't want to take vaccines, right? And these are people who are frankly ignorant about the way vaccination works and what the concept of herd immunity is. So they think they can opt out and they're going to be okay. They don't realize that actually weakens the group, right? The herd, as they say. I ran into this issue long ago when I worked for Oprah Winfrey. I was stunned because she had anti-vaxxers on the show, in particular Jenny McCarthy. And I brought it up as an issue. I said, this is a guest who is going to spread untruth. She's using your platform to spread misinformation. And I got shouted down. I got shouted down by the executive producers. They were very resistant. And the simple reason was because Jenny McCarthy pulled a rating. And somebody who's there to talk about vaccines did not pull a rating. So I guess what I'm offering here, Steve, is a little bit. If we're debating anything, it's whether this is the fault of AI or whether this is the environment, the media environment that people like you and I have created and worked in our careers, and AI just fits into that as the next iteration.
So a couple of things. First of all, absolutely, snake oil has always been snake oil. There was
Hmm.
always a seller of snake oil and always a buyer of snake oil. And at the end of the day, the Oprah folks needed to make a rating, and I get that. That is what it is. But I also think, the real question for these companies is what's the line between, needing to hit a number and keep your job and being irresponsible.
Yeah. When do
And
you hurt America? When do you hurt society? Yeah. At some point, spreading misinformation damages people.
and what I worry about with AI as the up until, look, Donald Trump was a creation of television. I mean, The Apprentice, the
Yeah.
character that he was on The Apprentice was not a real person. I mean,
No, and
the
literally, it's the
companies
only thing he's
he
done
built.
successful in his career, right? He wasn't a successful casino manager. He wasn't a really successful real estate developer, but he's a very successful reality TV host, reality in scare quotes.
Yeah. So here's why I think we're at a moment where there's real opportunity for change.
Hmm.
And that is, we get to ask the information that comes at us. Now that we know that it's being gathered and produced by a company, we can say to them, please show me how. So, for example, I've had conversations with ChatGPT about its feeling about Sora 2. And we had a long 2-hour conversation about where did Sora 2 come from? Was it good for the business? Why did Sam Altman greenlight it? You know,
This is
and
you
what it
talking to
came.
ChatGPT
Yeah,
about their own products.
yeah.
Let me guess that it was pretty supportive and had a good spin.
No,
Oh, so it was
I
critical.
mean, by the end, I asked it flat out, is Sora 2 dangerous? And it said yes. And I said, in hindsight, did it have any business purpose in releasing it? And they said, no, it did not.
Okay,
Now,
so that to me sounds like spin control from the press department, right? So what you're doing is it's flattering your bias. It somehow has detected that line of inquiry from you is critical, and therefore it's giving you, it's fueling your
what I
fire, if you
want.
will.
It most
So it's
certainly is.
manipulating you. Uh, Hey, here's the
I,
last thing for you. I wanted to
yeah.
ask you about. So, you work with young people at the center at the center, and you're focused on young people. And a large number of young people have opted out of traditional media altogether. They don't watch television. They don't know from cable television. Their source of news is TikTok. So CNN isn't really on their radar. Neither is Fox News. And a large and growing number of people don't even spend time with that kind of linear media. They spend time in fictional worlds, immersive game worlds, where they can spend hours a day and they communicate with other people who share that as a passion or as a hobby. And to my mind, that's like opting out of reality altogether. You're opting to go into a fictional world and spend as much time as you possibly can. And while I can totally understand that, I've been in the game industry, I get that as entertainment. It's highly fun and it can be addictive. My concern here is that an entire generation is being conditioned to opt into unreality as a way to escape from confronting the hard truths of reality. So to some extent, in a consumer society, we're presenting people with two choices. Choice A is entertaining and fun and flattering and obsequious, and it's pure pleasure and it's fake. And choice two is deal with the facts of the real world. It's a tough world. Politics is tough. Business is tough. Society can be very hard. Well, that's no fun for people. So guess what? Everyone's heading for option A. What's your take on that? In our closing moments, give me a perspective on that generational task and what the future looks like.
So, uh, not to disagree with you, but I have to tell you, at least in the Gen
Go for
Z
it.
community that I spend my time in, I find them to be thoughtful, deeply thoughtful, concerned, engaged, passionate, hardworking, like all of the stereotypes that people want to tell me about how Gen Z is behaving don't show up in maybe it's a subset of the community,
Mhm.
but I don't know what you were like when you were 15 or 16 years old. I was kind of a goofball. I mean, I was not thinking about world politics or health or environment. So I'm hopeful that given the right tools and as they continue to understand increasingly their power. I mean, one of the things that we haven't yet figured out, both at the center and kind of in the world, is Gen Z has enormous economic power. And within my advertising friends live in absolute fear that the Gen Z community will decide they're angry at their brand for something they did. Well, good. That's good. They should be afraid. That's very useful. So I think economic power is what it's all about. I think that the idea that truth kind of hangs in the balance, and that we didn't, when things seem too good to be true, they are. When the robot says to you every morning, Rob, you're brilliant and handsome and smart and funny, and the world doesn't appreciate how wonderful you are, you should take that with a grain of salt, because,
from now on, I will.
when you go to the clothing store and the person says, "Oh, that looks great on you,"
Right.
"Oh yeah, I have one just like that." You should know that that's bullshit. I mean,
I know.
they got to
when
sell
it's on
shit.
a computer screen, it seems so believable.
It does seem so believable. So with that, I would say the book is out May 12th.
Great.
Money back guarantee. Buy it. If you don't like it, send it back to me. I'll give you. No, I don't have a money back guarantee. But
All right.
but it's a good journey.
That's great. Steve, thank you very much for joining us on The Futurists this week. Folks, we've been listening to Steve Rosenbaum. Steve, where can people find out more about you and the center, and then tell us where they can find out about the book?
Sure. Thefutureoftruth.com will tell you about the book and all of the links and all of the work we're doing. And I'm out and about and traveling and talking to people. And the center is the sustainablemedia.center. And both of those sites tell you everything you need to know about me.
Super. Well, thank you very much for joining us on The Futurists this week, and good luck with the book launch. I'm a fan. I've already pre-ordered my copy. Folks, The Future of Truth hits bookstores in mid-May, and you can pre-order it now on Amazon. I already did. And thanks for listening to The Futurists. And next week, Brett and I will be back with another person who is thinking about and shaping the future that they envision. Until then, we'll see you in the future.